So we are here today. We're doing our marine mammal highlights. So we're going to talk about 3 different marine mammals and discuss what's cool about them and why we like them, and maybe decide which one maybe is the best one or not. So I'm Dr. Cindy Elliser, the research director for Pacific Mammal Research.
And I'm Kat MacIver. I'm the research assistant for Pacific Mammal Research.
And I'm Trevor Derie, and I'm their intern for the summer and the spring.
Awesome intern. All right, so
number one intern right now.
That's right. We have chosen 3 different marine mammals. So I chose the narwhal, and Kat, you chose?
I chose the beluga.
And Trevor, you chose?
I chose the humpback whale.
Humpback whale. So we got the narwhal versus the beluga versus the humpback whale. So I guess I'll kind of start. We'll just each give our little synopsis of our animal, and we'll do some discussion. At the end, we'll kind of discuss all 3 of them and see who comes out on top. So the narwhal is awesome because it has a giant horn, which is awesome. I mean, come on, it's up to 10. It's up to 10 feet long. I mean, how can you go bad with that? But what the really cool part of the narwhal is that the unicorn myth, because unicorns aren't real.
Warning, don't let your kids listen to this if they believe in unicorns.
Actually came from that, from the narwhal. So the whalers that came over from Europe basically got some of these horns after killing whales, and then went back and had these really tall tales about what creature it came from. So they're like, yeah, it's a horse with a really big horn and stuff. But I mean, that's more plausible than a whale, honestly, I think.
I was going to say, like, that actually kind of weirdly makes more sense than, like, oh, it came from a sea creature. It's like, what?
Right. It's actually like, even though it's a tall tail, it's more believable.
A lot of people are like just finding out that narwhals actually exist too.
Oh, that's true. No, yeah. Like a lot of people are like, no, that's not real. That's not a real thing.
Yeah, a lot of people thought it was Photoshopped for like years. They're like, no, it's like one of those weird things with like the mega shark or whatever. It's like, it's not a real thing.
Yeah. I had a student actually come up, they're like, no, that's real. I'm like, yeah, no, seriously, they exist. But what's really cool about it, and you know what, we don't know a lot about these guys because they live in the Arctic, and it's basically dark half the year and covered in ice in half the year. So not exactly the greatest place to go do field research. So they've done the most research, honestly, on the tusk, because it's actually a tusk. It's not a horn. It is a tooth, which is really weird. And so they've done a lot about that. And what they've recently found out, which is I thought was so cool when I learned this, is that it's an inside-out tooth. So the thing has always been like, well, why do they have these giant horns? People are like, oh, it's for foraging, or actually they sword fight. The males sword fight for the females because they're only found on males. Only about 15% of females have it. So now,
which is actually quite a high percentage. Like if you think about it, that's actually quite a high percentage of females that randomly have it.
That have it. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Odd. Yeah, I'm not sure why they happen to have them. I don't know. But you know, as cool as it would be to see jousting narwhals, it's not really what they do. And then also too, you think about like they spear their prey. How are they going to get the prey off the horn? And their tiny little flippers,
right? Like slide it onto the ice and then like scoop up onto the ice somehow.
Like a shish kebab. Like no. So what they actually found out is that instead of how our teeth have the hard enamel on the outside and the soft stuff on the inside, it's actually switched. So they have the soft stuff on the outside and the hard stuff on the inside, and it's filled with tiny little 10 million, something like that, nerve endings and tiny holes. So they actually can sense chemical changes in the seawater.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So they do think that it's for that. So they might be able to find better prey. They might be able to find a female that's ready to want to have a baby, things like that. And it may be like, yeah, so the male, it may also be a sexual selection thing because, well, the one who has the biggest tusk has the best way of finding food and thus would be the better male to mate with, kind of thing.
Right.
But they have seen them actually stun prey with the tusk, though.
I was gonna say I've seen that video, yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And in the blog post that we have for this, I have a link to that video. So, and they actually rub tusks together. So it's a multifunctional tool, you know.
Well, like any kind of sense organ, I guess, like kind of like an elephant's trunk or something, you know.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, it can do a lot of different things.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. So we don't know a lot more about them besides the really cool tusk, but like I said, it can get up to 10 feet long. So it's pretty impressive. Oh, and it always grows straight, which is you think about other tusks, they all curve.
Right.
But this tusk grows straight.
But it's spiraled, right?
But it spirals, but that's why it grows straight. Because no matter if it's more on one side or less on the other side as it grows, because it grows like a tooth, because it is one, because the spiral keeps it even and keeps it going straight.
Gotcha.
You think it'd
Question.
be good for them too, with Arctic ice and all that too, when they're navigating through all that, especially when they need to breathe in small holes.
Yeah, you'd be able to knock it. Yeah, if the ice isn't too thick, for sure.
Right. Do we know? Does the tusk keep growing?
Yes.
Like, does it grow exponentially? Wow,
it keeps growing.
That's crazy.
Which is why it gets to be like 10 feet long by the time they're a bit older. And some of them they break off and then that's it. And sometimes they grow two, because it's actually have two teeth.
Right.
But the one, if the other one grows, it's much shorter.
Weird.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So narwhals are cool because they're unicorns of the sea. Okay. So let's keep it Arctic and go with the beluga, because they're fairly quite similar.
They're related, actually.
Yeah.
So they're part of the same family. The Monodontidae, I think that's how you say it. Am I saying that right? Yeah, Monodontidae. So technically meaning one tooth, but belugas actually have up to 40 teeth.
Yeah.
But they're all up to 40. I thought they have up to 40. They just don't really use them. So they typically they suck their prey up.
Which is like the narwhal, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, they do have potentially up to 40, but they're all the same. So they're what they call homodont teeth. So they're all the same. You know, we have multiple different kinds of teeth in our mouth.
Right.
But yeah, so sticking with the Arctic, like Cindy said, so these guys, again, we don't know a ton about them. There's a lot more research that started to be done on belugas probably in the last like 10 to 15 years. As technology gets better and as we have more and more access to the Arctic, just with, you know, ability to get up there and stay up there. And
we saw that one lady at the conference that's doing amazing work up there,
Valerie,
photo ID and stuff.
Yeah, she's one of the leaders in, and when I put my blog post about belugas up, I'll link to a couple of her articles, because that's where a lot of the information actually comes from now. Because she's incredible. She just goes up there for like multiple months and watches these guys do all kinds of stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, so obviously belugas are most well known for their white coloring, which is great camouflage if you live up amongst Arctic ice floes. But actually they're not born white. So their babies are usually kind of like a grayish cream and then they kind of go to like a dark gray blue. And then as they get older.
Yeah, and that's what happens to the narwhals too.
Yes.
They're born gray and then they get whiter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm not sure why that would be beneficial for the babies to be darker when in terms of camouflage. I don't know if they'd be more inclined to just be cast as a shadow of the mother. And so if they're looking for, their predators are basically killer whales and polar bears, and then obviously indigenous peoples who hunt them for food and resources. Right. And those are also linked to a myth. So it's been thought that the belugas were where the legend of the mermaid originated.
Yep. The sea canaries.
Yep. So they're known as sea canaries, and it's because they have one of the most diverse vocal repertoires that we know of. And they can actually even mimic like human speech. So the belugas in the captivity have been documented to actually mimic like human words and stuff like that. So they're incredibly diverse in terms of like the sounds they can produce. Part is because they have that huge kind of bulbous, what's called the melon. So that's where cetaceans actually will create the sound and project the sound out and then receive sound through the lower jaw typically. But because theirs is so big and it's flexible, they actually have a lot more ability. It's kind of like when you practice with your vocal cords, right? The muscles of your vocal cords get more strengthened, and then you can actually make more sounds. And that actually changes shape when they're vocalizing. So it's like they're making faces because their head moves.
Yeah. That was the coolest thing when I see them at captivity and you see them do that, and it's like,
yeah.
Whoa,
it's gnarly. So it's one of the reasons that they're obviously like in captivity, they're one of the most beloved animals, because they have such a kind of quote unquote human looking face, because they can move their face in various expressions. But yeah, because of their the way that they would call, and they do actually sing a lot, then it was thought that some sailors back in the day were hearing belugas and beluga song, and they didn't know what they were hearing, and so they believed that was where one of the legends of the mermaid originated, which is pretty cool. What else about belugas? They can swim backwards, which is possibly the coolest thing ever, which makes sense. I mean, if you're again living in the Arctic and you're inclined to get trapped by ice, right? And that happens a lot. Like they actually get into really, really shallow areas, and then the ice starts to encroach again, and so they do literally sometimes have to like back themselves out of a situation. Otherwise, they're going to get stuck there. They're also most well known because they don't have a dorsal fin. So again, just like the narwhals, they actually don't have a dorsal fin. So one of very few cetaceans to not have a dorsal fin at all. They do have a dorsal ridge, and it's thought that's kind of slightly hardened in belugas, and it's thought that they might actually use that to help break up kind of softer ice when they're surfacing, which is quite interesting.
Sense.
Yeah. Yep. What else? There's cervical vertebrae, so the vertebrae in their neck.
Because they can actually like turn. Yeah,
right.
they can
so
turn
in most cetaceans, that's solid, right? So they can only turn their head kind of like this. They can move their head in all directions. So again, it kind of gives them more of that human persona because they can actually move their head more similarly to how we can move our head. And again, makes sense in an ice context where you're maybe trying to get up to get a breath, or you're having to maneuver in very, very shallow water. They think it might be partly to do with that, and also partly to do with like foraging strategies and stuff, and how they would need to move their head in the confines of their environment. Cool. So they're pretty cool actually. And I think it's like up to 40% of their body weight is blubber, because obviously they live in the high Arctic. So it's like, gotta stay warm.
I think it's on one of those things where the more extreme environments, you get more crazy looking things.
Right.
In general. So you're going to have some adaptations to live in Arctic waters.
Exactly. And just as a side note too, the name beluga, which probably a lot of people already know, but the name beluga, I'm not going to butcher the Russian word, but it comes from a Russian word that means white.
Right. I was going to bring this up too, speaking of names, Narwhal.
I was going to say, where did narwhal come from?
Yeah, so narwhal it's Norse. So it's Nar and then Hval. And this is really kind of creepy, means corpse whale. Yeah, really? Because the Norse sailors thought that it resembled the skin of a drowned sailor. I think they're prettier than that, but
I was gonna say I don't think I've seen any dead sailors, but I'd say a narwhal is actually pretty attractive. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that. And then they have another one. They have a Inuit name, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that because I will not do it well. But it starts with they both start with Q's. It's like Quiliquiag Hornaktuak, means one that points to the sky, because they stick their horn up and straight in the air. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then then they have, of course, their scientific name is Monodon monoceros, which means one tooth, one horn in Greek. So it's kind of cool. They have like 3 different names that all have to do with, stuff about them.
Makes sense. They have a pretty distinguishing feature, that helps.
Little bit.
Helps with naming.
A little bit. Okay, so we'll move on now to the humpback, which spends some time up close to the Arctic, but just not year-round like our guys do.
That's kind of why I like them a lot, just based on their life history, just based on the amount of miles they migrate and such.
It's pretty impressive.
So I think like the Northern Hemisphere, the typical ones are from Alaska down to Hawaii or along the tropical waters. And I've seen those ones in Hawaii whenever I go, which has been a few times. And then you get the few passerbys that come in through here as well, which is really exciting. And then I saw the ones in Australia too that go down to Antarctica and then come up to Australian waters, which is really cool.
Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere ones. They meet in the middle and then they...
That's something, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite part about them is just how different they look, especially with their flippers, and how we're just trying to figure out why they look different and how they use them compared to, balance of other whales and such.
Yeah, they have super long flippers.
Right. I don't know if you guys saw that video a few years ago where they just found out they kind of flap them underwater sometimes, like a bird, to help propel really quickly.
Really?
There's some research on that when they were feeding.
So they're actually like going like that and then going.
Yeah, they have it. I can find the video later, but a researcher out of Stanford saw they were feeding and would propel themselves really fast with their flippers.
Whoa.
And just do a quick lunge. Or help slow down too. Yeah. But you don't really see that in other whales besides control and balance. But
well, again, comparatively, most other whales and dolphins have rather
stiff
T-Rex arms.
Stiff and short arms, short flippers, compared to the very long flippers of the humpback.
Right. But just that and the intelligence of them too is really interesting to me. We're starting to learn a little bit more about them as they regain their population after we decimated it.
Right.
Which is true of most of these whales.
Yes, true.
Right. It's really curious, which is really interesting to me, and the potential of altruism. Have you seen that?
Mm.
Where they have habitually disrupted orca whale kills or attacks.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well,
The
for
theory,
ones that
yeah.
are not, as far as they know, not related to, and sometimes different species, right? They'll protect like
Right.
another species from it being attacked.
There's that video of one of them carrying a seal away on its belly.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You will live another day.
But yeah, just I don't know. That seems weird to me that they would risk their own lives for other things. It's probably just what if it's a calf or something like that they're attacking. But
yeah, but I mean, altruism in marine mammals is, I mean, in anything, altruism is hard to find generally. Right. But they have seen it in a few species, and I think, I mean, they've had instances of other species, marine mammal species, helping individuals that they aren't related to.
Right.
But whether you can call that pure altruism or not is the debate that always goes on, right? Maybe there's some other reason that they benefited from it somehow.
That's the thing. It's just a theory, yeah. But
still cool though.
Either way, yeah. I was gonna say, and even if it is altruism, like it's one of those things where we could never, we may never understand why. Even if it is pure altruism, we may never even understand why they're doing it. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's such an open-ended question because we can only look at it as humans. We don't know all the costs and benefits that they're actually, incurring in the marine mammal world, although we can guess at quite a lot of them. But
well, and like the risks that they take, whether they're foraging or doing that, like maybe the risk isn't that much for them, but we think it is because they're going in the middle of a predator thing. But to them, it's like, no, it really wasn't a big deal, guys.
Yeah.
Fine.
Something I want to see too is their bubble net feeding.
Oh, I do too. That's on my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really impressive to me how they figured that out. Is that only in the northern hemisphere or that southern hemisphere too?
I was just going to ask you. I've only ever heard about it from like up in Alaska, really.
Right.
But
yeah,
I don't know a ton about the southern hemisphere animals except for the changes in their song as they migrate.
Right, and they all have different dialects and.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing with the song too, which probably my most favorite thing about the humpback whale is that they have these songs, but they all sing in a certain region. They all sing the same song, and then somebody changes the words, and next year
on part of it, not even on the whole thing. Usually, on
right, just like a little section of it. They're like, oh, this is a little bit better, and then everybody learns it.
Yeah, and
how do you do that? Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
And then by the next year, they're singing like the new line to the song.
Yeah.
So cool.
And these are like hundreds of miles apart, these whales that are all singing the same song every year. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the first ones that showed more of a solidified that culture could really be applied to other species besides humans and stuff, and particularly marine mammals, because it's definitely a song. You can see the repeated measures and all that kind of stuff, and how it changes in their communicating.
That's why their intelligence is so interesting to me. It's hard to gauge and measure, but
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. But I mean, it's obviously there. That's the thing. That's the cool part.
Right.
And a lot of tests are based off of human intelligence, and how do we compare that with other animals?
Mm-hmm. So that one of my favorite cartoons that I share this with a lot of my students is it's a Far Side cartoon, and it's got a captive dolphin and these scientists, and they're all writing. There's one by the tank, and the guy writing it down, and he's got all these Spanish phrases on the board, and it's going, we're getting another one of those que habla español sounds. And so it's like, they're like, wow, I don't know what's going on. And they're just speaking, language. They're not saying that they're speaking, but it's one that they would know. But it just goes to show that we're expecting them to speak something like us or to act like us because that's what we know. Mm-hmm. But that's not how it is. Their intelligence is going to be very different than ours because they're in a very different world.
Right.
So,
and it's interesting to me that even at this point in history, like we still kind of associate them being able to replicate human actions or speech as intelligence.
Right.
It's really interesting where even, we all know at this point that there's so much that they do that, is way far, way more intelligent than us in their context. But yeah, it's always been really interesting to me that we still are like, wow, they understand this human word. They must be super intelligent. It's like,
well, they are because they can do that. That's pretty impressive, but doesn't mean that everybody else isn't also intelligent because they do that.
Right.
I was just reading a really good book by Frans de Waal, the famous primatologist, called "Are We Smart Enough to Think About? Are we smart enough to know how smart animals are?" Do you have it there?
Yeah, I read that.
Wow.
It is a really good book, and it discusses this
good.
whole thing, like how do we assess how smart an animal is? How do we assess a humpback whale's intelligence? We can't keep them in captivity, contrary to belief of the Star Trek movie, where they were able to keep a humpback whale in captivity. Not going to happen. But great movie, by the way. But you know, there's just we have to figure out how we can assess it, and also what it means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
which is so difficult because again, we're confined by our own intelligence and what that looks like to us, you know. So it's such a difficult question.
The one example in there, because he's a primatologist, is a lot of primate stuff, and they gave chimpanzees people pictures, and the chimpanzees couldn't tell the humans apart. They weren't very good at it. They're like, oh, well, they can't do self-recognition.
They must be stupid. Yeah.
Really must be stupid, right? And then somebody was like, why don't we give them pictures of chimpanzees? And we're like, well, we can't tell chimpanzees apart. They all look the same. But they could tell the chimpanzees apart super easily. So it's just a matter of getting them the right test to show that they can do a certain task.
Yeah. It's interesting. So do we want to touch on, for each of our cetaceans, do we want to touch on like maybe some of the threats that are facing them or some of the similarities that they have?
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, I think all of them.
I think we all have similar threats.
Yeah. I mean, especially the Arctic ones, you know, the climate change is a huge one for the Arctic, because they need sea ice, they need all that stuff that goes into the ecosystem, and the coldest places are going to be hit hardest by global warming. That's just what.
So that's one of the other things is they do. It's not just linked to, you know, them being at the top of the food web either. It's also their predators and how they interact with their predators. So, for example, like with the belugas, if the sea ice is breaking up, they have less ability to escape from, say, a polar bear or something. And the polar bears are going hungry because the sea ice is receding. So they're more likely to start on those larger animals that could potentially get trapped up there or don't have the cover of sea ice in the way that they would normally. So it's not just about them struggling because their food is moving or shifting. It's also the animals that would prey on them too.
And we've seen in other places where, you know, they always talk about bottom up stuff, but you take away a top predator and it can completely collapse an ecosystem. So, you know, it's not just that the prey is gone. If something happens to the beluga or the polar bear, it can throw the whole thing out of whack.
And also one of the biggest things too is in terms of the climate change thing as well is also that because especially the animals that live in the high Arctic, like I said, I mean, they have such a huge amount of blubber. That's where a lot of the toxins get stored in any animal's body. Your body will process it and store it in the fat reserves. And so if they get to the point where they're hungry, similar to what's happening with the orcas here, you know, if they get hungry, they have to start metabolizing that fat store, and then they're basically getting dosed with toxins that they've accumulated over the years every time they're using those fat stores. So that's also, the belugas they were actually thought to be the most toxic animal in the world, and then they realized that the male killer whales in this area were actually more toxic.
Oh, are they? Because I'd always heard that the St. Lawrence basically is one of the most polluted places there, and they would actually use their bodies as toxic waste. They would treat it as toxic waste.
I'd have to double check that. I know there was a study that came out where they were basically like, the male southern residents are actually slightly more toxic for their size. But I'd have to double check that because I think there's been more studies done on that in the last couple of years.
Yeah, because the males also don't offload their stuff to the babies as the females do, so that over time they're going to accumulate more.
Yeah, but so that's another big thing to do with climate change. If their food starts to shift and they do start to go hungry, they are also going to start to suffer issues from toxic.
Right, because you start to metabolize the fat that has all the stuff in it.
Yeah.
The other one, noise. So maybe Trevor can talk more about this one too, especially with the humpbacks. I mean, all marine mammals have issues with vessel noise, and we're very noisy neighbors in the ocean.
Just that disrupts communication, which obviously disrupts mating and gathering and socializing and all that.
Yeah, imagine if you could hear a song 30 miles away, and now all of a sudden you can only hear it 5 miles away. Well,
especially in the Puget Sound where all the ships are just channeled into one spot.
Right. The other thing too is just, again, kind of going back to that cultural concept of the song, because especially for humpbacks, it is such a component of their cultural heritage and also how they maintain sociality. Like you said, if you're limiting that to, you know, as a lot of us are kind of finding now, like, oh, you can only talk to these people because they live here, or they're closer to you.
Right.
Right.
that becomes more and more of a problem for them in terms of their culture too, and who knows what ramifications that has on their behavior.
And finding food is another one of the big ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
A major threat too is entanglement and boat strikes for humpbacks particularly.
Yes,
yeah,
that's definitely more for humpbacks than the other two, but I mean, it's always a problem. But
just crab pots and fishing nets and such, and yeah.
So what happens, they oftentimes, if they'll get them wrapped around their flukes, and so the way I do the analogy is like if I put a 20-pound weight on a chain and put it on your legs, how long could you run? How long could you walk before you eventually just get tired? And so that's what it's just increasing that drag. That even if they can swim with it, it's going to cause them to be tired very quickly, and they're not going to be able to feed, and then they get more tired and more sick, and then just not good. Anything else? I think those are the main ones. Hunting, luckily, not so much around here. There are still some places that hunt.
Hunting, like you already mentioned, Trevor, like hunting, all of those species have been, and the narwhal and the beluga are still to some degree. I'm not sure if the humpbacks are they still hunted by certain tribes? I know the grays are a little bit.
I think some of them are they're allowed a certain take. I think. Yeah. Depending on the tribe.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Because I mean, it certainly, I think, was more of a problem back in the day of whaling, obviously, but
there's still other countries that still whale, but it's definitely much better than it was.
Yeah, and like you said, Trevor, I mean that literally decimated the population of particularly humpbacks.
But they're a pretty good poster child for recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and again, that's in the Salish Sea where we are. The humpbacks have rebounded, and they're coming back more and more every year. Right. And we're now just realizing, like, oh, they used to be here,
right?
And then the population got decimated, and we were thinking, like, wow, this is new. Like, no, this is what it should have been.
Yeah.
Right. which is super encouraging.
5 or something like that would come in, and now there's like maybe a little more than that, but now there's like at least 60 or 70 or whatever.
There's like a lot,
quite a few more.
So like you're right, it is good to show as a poster, like you said, a poster child, where if you do protections, they can come back. Just takes them a while because they are longer lived animals. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, do we want
I think that's
start
about it.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still gonna go with narwhal being super awesome because it has a horn. I'm just gonna
say they're all super awesome, but I think we should have people write in and tell us what their favorite one is.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. So they can comment on the in the comments below. You can tell us which one you think, or email us too. Either way, let us know what you guys think is the coolest one, and maybe why. We give a short reason why you think it is, because let's face it, all marine mammals are super awesome. They all have some cool thing about them. So it's hard to pick, but it's fun to
decide. And this was actually it sounded like a great idea to do this. And we're like, oh man, that's a really hard question. Like, I don't, they're all my favorite. Like, how do I choose a favorite?
Someone did that at the end of one of my presentations. They're like, what's your favorite marine mammal? I'm like, I have to choose
one with fins.
One with flippers or fins, one of those. It's like, what's your favorite day? The one that ends in day. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, be sure we're going to do some more of these and highlight some other marine mammals as we go. And so look out for that on the YouTube channel. And please write in the comments which ones you like and which animals
let us know
you like
if there's other videos that you want us to do too. Like if there's other stuff that you guys want to hear about, or anything else that you would find fun to do with kids at home, or just something to distract yourself with. Let us know.
Give us ideas. We'll love to discuss. We can discuss many things.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Or actually, you'll see us next time.
Bye.
Bye.